In this video, I'm going to talk about how I survived medical school having ADHD and dyslexia. Welcome back, my optimal minds, and today I'm going to talk about why I was able to go through medical school having both ADHD and dyslexia. A lot of people ask me, how are you able to go through medical school with having ADHD and dyslexia? So I'm going to go over 5 things that were really important for me to be able to do this because it wasn't easy. Schooling was never an easy thing for me. Some people with ADHD, sometimes it can be easy. It's just they have a hard time actually following through tasks, but they have the intelligence to be able to have the smarts. But my biggest challenge was definitely having test anxiety, taking exams, and several other things that come with ADHD and dyslexia. So the very first thing, and I think this is really important, that made a huge difference when it came to not only in medical school, but also college. So just because you're not going into medical school, but maybe you're going into college, you could still apply these same principles if you have ADHD and also dyslexia. But the very first thing that I would say is finding a mentor early on when you're in college. And then I had to find mentors while I was in college, but also mentors when I was in medical school. So what qualifies as a mentor? Well, this can be, a lot of times it was for me, was a professor that really cared about my success and understand my challenges that I faced on a daily basis that I would go visit all the time, like on sometimes a couple times a week, sometimes it was daily. It just really depended on when their office hours were. But I always would go in their office and we would talk about, challenges that I had, and then they would give me tips and things to implement. And a lot of times these were usually professors that maybe I was having a hard time in their class. But even after I was done with their class, I would still go visit them all the time, and they would be able to give me still helpful tips. The other thing that was also nice having these mentors or professors in the back pocket was that I was able to have someone holding me accountable to following through with things. And that is one of the biggest key things that I think that helped a lot with my ADHD and dyslexia to be able to successfully get through college and medical school. The second thing that I utilized a lot and made a huge difference for my ADHD and dyslexia is using the free tutoring system that colleges and even medical schools do provide. This is an underused resource that a lot of students do not use, and it's free. Now, maybe there might be certain colleges that don't have free resources, but I would go ask and see what kind of free resources that they do have for tutoring. And so I would go through certain tutors because every tutor has a different style, but I would find some that were really helpful because it helped me see how to learn differently and definitely creative ways of learning. And that's how I learned a lot of these different tips over the years that I started implementing that were really more ADHD friendly and dyslexia friendly versus just a neurotypical way of learning. The third thing that was really helpful, and especially for my dyslexic brain and my ADHD brain, because if you have a hard time reading, guess what? Dyslexia makes it difficult because everything just starts flipping and turning and you read it very differently. And even when you have ADHD, having that combination of being distracted all the time that you can only read a couple sentences and then your mind wanders off, this makes it even especially difficult. And for me, it was always a challenge. And it wasn't until I learned about speed reading. And I almost feel like anybody that has dyslexia or ADHD should learn how to speed read. And the reason why is because when you learn how to speed read, it keeps your brain very engaged, and versus just reading passively through it. Of course, your ADHD brain is going to be really bored. And when it comes to dyslexia, when those middle letters are jumbling and, changing on you, it's because your brain can't process it very well. But for me, at least how I understand it, is if you ever had those tests where maybe it was on social media, I remember someone posted something like that where they purposely mixed the middle letters within each word. And then it said, if you could read this whole paragraph, it means you have dyslexia. And I was able to read it just fine. And other people would be like, how can you even read this? And that's when a light bulb came on. I was like, it makes sense. I think dyslexic people do really well with speed reading because the whole idea with speed reading is you're catching all the key words within that actual whole page and within a whole chapter. And you start learning this process that you grasp the concept, but you actually are learning something versus reading from word to word to word. And then after you finish the chapter, you wondered, what did I even read? But when you do speed reading, you are training yourself to start catching those keywords and start asking yourself questions. So you're an active reader versus just a passive reader. And when that happens, guess what? You remember more. And when you have pop quizzes in your college or in medical school, you're able to answer those questions because you did it in that fashion versus just a way of just reading word from word. The fourth strategy, and not only was this really helpful for me getting and surviving through medical school with ADHD and dyslexia, but it also helped me survive through college, is planning way ahead. So when you get your class schedule, when you're in medical school, you get a class schedule. I would go visit every single one of those teachers before class even started. And the reason I would do this is I would ask for the syllabus beforehand to see, okay, how many quizzes, how many exams, what other assignments do we have to do? And I would put it all on a big calendar so I could see the whole thing. And the reason why I do this is because, especially since I dealt with a lot of anxiety and stress, especially around exams, I had to plan way ahead so that when the exams did come around, I was prepped for taking 6 exams in one day. And especially what we call is, the big exam week, where you would have that every 3 to 4 weeks, always exams. And when I planned way ahead, I was able to be prepared, especially emotionally prepared for these things. But at the same time, in college, what I would do is when I would go and see the professor first, I would see how extensive their exams and assignments they had, how many papers I had to write. And if I felt like it was too much, guess what? I didn't take that class. So going in blindly is not a good idea if you have ADHD and dyslexia. But when you actually go and talk to the teacher and find out beforehand, you can determine if that's something you could handle, the load, because you don't want to load on too much. I made that mistake very early on in my college years. When I first came back, when I was living in Russia for a while and came back, I made the mistake of taking all science classes. I had no clue what was in each class and what was the assignments and what tests and how many to take until I was already in it. Luckily, I was able to withdraw from some of them, so I didn't really mess up my whole semester that very first semester coming back. But from that point on, I made sure to be with every professor beforehand to make sure if it's something, a load that I can handle with my ADHD and dyslexic brain. The fifth thing, and I think this is something that everybody should do, and I don't care if you're an introvert, but is to find a studious friend, someone who's really studious and is really good at taking notes, is very organized and very structured, because us people with ADHD and even dyslexia, we're not very organized. Let's just be honest. We're not the best at taking notes. I was definitely not very good at taking notes. I mean, I got really good at creating very creative notes, especially after class, but during class, it's hard for me to grasp everything that was said from the teacher. So this made all the difference for me as well, is I found a studious friend who was very good at taking notes for us, especially for biochemistry and pathophysiology and pretty much all the ology classes. And she made very visual and very organized notes for us. And she let us actually take her notes and copy her notes that we could study off of, which made a huge difference for me to be able to prep and study for exams. It brought down, my anxiety of taking exams and actually boosted my confidence because I knew her notes had everything in it that you needed to know, which was amazing. Now, not everybody's lucky, but try to see who is, the more studious ones in your class and become friends with them. And even if they are weird or different, and if they don't want to be your friends and don't want to help you out, well, find another studious person. Trust me, you could find someone who's studious and who's willing to help you out. Those are the 5 biggest things that have helped me survive medical school, having ADHD and dyslexia. But you're probably wondering, okay, what are some specific tips and methods that you used in medical school, having an ADHD brain, that I can maybe apply in college, or even if you're in high school, or if you're a parent and have a kid that's struggling? Well, check out this video right here that goes over my study tips and suggestions that I used in medical school that helped me through college and medical school. So watch this video right now. Thanks.